All right, good morning, guys. Today is Thursday as we close out another week here with remote learning. We're going to pick back up here with Fahrenheit 451 in part 3, the final part of the book. Only a few pages left to go. But where we left off yesterday was Beatty being set on fire. That was crazy, right? And all that graphic imagery that Bradbury creates for that scene as he is just pouring liquid fire on him with his flamethrower, and now Montag is on the run from the law. So he's made his way through the city. He can hear in his seashell radio that he's now a fugitive, and there are cops from everywhere looking for him. Actually, the image we left off with was the helicopters that were up in the sky searching, looking at night, and then dropping down and driving on the road looking for him too. Montag doesn't really have a whole lot of options as far as places to go. His wife is the one who turned in the alarm on him, so he is making his way to Faber. He had gotten bit by the hound, but that has started to wear off. And now where we left off on page 119 for you guys, where we had left off, he was making his way to this wide open 10-lane highway. So imagine being like on a like 94 or a tollway or something like that, where people are driving on both sides of the road combined. It's about 10 lanes of highway, but it would be hard to cross something like that. You better be fast. If there wasn't anything in the middle and you had to run from one side all the way to the other, you better be fast. And we know that people in this society like to drive pretty fast. So we're going to pick up on page 119 and see what Montag's about to do as he's running from the police. And here was the gas station. Its attendants busy now with customers. Approaching from the rear, Montag entered the men's washroom. Through the aluminum wall, he heard a radio voice saying, "War has been declared." The gas was being pumped outside. The men in the Beatles were talking, and the attendants were talking about the engines, the gas, the money owed. Montag stood trying to make himself feel the shock of the quiet statement from the radio, but nothing would happen. The war would have to wait for him to come to it in his personal file, an hour, 2 hours from now. Okay, so that's an interesting development here, is that this has been something that's been brewing in the background of this story all along, is the jets flying overhead, Miss Phelps' husband being away at war. War has now officially been declared, but Montag's got bigger things to worry about. He can't even think about that right now. He washed his hands and face and toweled himself dry, making little sound. He came out of the washroom and shut the door carefully and walked into the darkness, and at last stood again on the edge of the empty boulevard. There it lay, a game for him to win, a vast bowling alley in the cool morning. The boulevard was as clean as the surface of an arena 2 minutes before the appearance of certain unnamed victims and certain unknown killers. The air over and above the vast concrete river trembled with the warmth of Montag's body alone. It was incredible how he felt his temperature could cause the whole immediate world to vibrate. He was a phosphorescent target. He knew it. He felt it. And now he must begin his little walk. 3 blocks away, a few headlights glared. Montag drew a deep breath. His lungs were like burning brooms in his chest. His mouth was sucked dry from running. His throat tasted of bloody iron, and there was rusted steel in his feet. So again, just want to point out all of the graphic imagery that Bradbury uses in his writing. In this case, just to describe the way somebody feels when they're tired, when they're worn out from activity. The way he's described here, his lungs were like burning brooms in his chest. So look at that simile, like burning brooms. So it's like, just imagine the pain in your chest as you're trying to catch your breath, like after you maybe run for an extended period of time. His mouth was sucked dry from running. So the idea of running with your mouth open and having a dry mouth. or his throat tasted of bloody iron and there was rust in his feet. And for those of you who've ever had to run for an extended period of time, that's happened. This is the way it's described. So you have all of the different senses being used here in the description. It's just something that he does better than most, for sure. What about those lights there? Once you started walking, you'd have to gauge how fast those beetles could make it down here. Well, how far was it to the other curb? It seemed like 100 yards. Probably not 100, but figure for that anyway. Figure that with him going very slowly at a nice stroll, it might take as much as 30 seconds, 40 seconds to walk all that way. Remember, he can't run. Like that's what's being announced over the radio. Be on the lookout for a running man. So he's got to walk casually across this boulevard, which in this society, again, it's not common for people to be walking, especially late at night. Once started, they could leave 3 blocks behind them in about 15 seconds. So even if halfway across, he started to run. He put his right foot out, and then his left foot, and then his right. He walked on the empty avenue. Even if the street weren't entirely empty, of course, you couldn't be sure of a safe crossing, for a car could appear suddenly over the rise 4 blocks farther on and be on and past you before you had taken a dozen breaths. He decided not to count his steps. He looked neither to the left nor right. The light from the overhead lamps seemed as bright and revealing as the midday sun, and just as hot. He listened to the sound of the car picking up speed 2 blocks away on his right. Its movable headlights jerked back and forth suddenly and caught at Montag. Keep going. Montag faltered, got a grip on the books, and forced himself not to freeze. Instinctively, he took a few quick running steps and then talked out loud to himself and pulled up to a stroll again. He was now half across the street, but the roar from the Beetle's engines whined higher as it put on speed. The police, of course. They see me. But slow now. Slow, quiet, don't turn, don't look, don't seem concerned. Walk, that's it. Walk. Walk. The Beetle was rushing. The Beetle was roaring. The Beetle raised its speed. The Beetle was whining. The Beetle was in high thunder. The Beetle came skimming. The Beetle came in a single whistling trajectory fired from an invisible rifle. It was up to 120 miles per hour. It was up to 130 at least. Montag clamped his jaws. The heat of the racing headlights burnt his cheeks, it seemed, and jittered his eyelids and flushed the sour sweat out all over his body. He began to shuffle idiotically and talk to himself, and then he broke and just ran. He put out his legs as far as they would go, and down, and then far out again, and down, and back, and out, and down, and back. God, he dropped a book. He broke pace, almost turned, changed his mind, plunged on, yelling in concrete emptiness, the Beetle scuttling after its running food, 200, 100 feet away, 90, 80, 70, Montag gasping, flailing his hands, legs up, down, out, closer, hooting, calling, his eyes burnt white now, with his head jerked about to confront the flashing glare, and the Beetle was swallowed in its own light. Now it was nothing but a torch hurtling upon him, all sound, all blare, now almost on top of him. He stumbled and fell. I'm done. It's over. But the falling made a difference. An instant before reaching him, the wild Beetle cut and swerved out. It was gone. Montag lay flat, his head down. Wisps of laughter trailed back to him with the blue exhaust from the Beetle. His right hand was extended above him, flat across the extreme tip of his middle finger. He saw now, as he lifted that hand, a faint 1/16 of an inch of black tread where the tire had touched in passing. He looked at that black line with disbelief, getting to his feet. That was close. That wasn't the police, he thought. He looked down the boulevard. It was clear now. A car full of children, all ages, God knew, from 12 to 16, out whistling, yelling, hurrahing, had seen a man, a very extraordinary sight, a man strolling, a rarity, and simply said, Let's get him. Not knowing that he was the fugitive, Mr. Montag, simply a number of children out for a long night of roaring 500 or 600 miles in a few moonlit hours, their faces icy with wind, and coming home or not coming at dawn, alive or not alive, that made the adventure. They would have killed me, thought Montag, swaying, the air still torn and stirring about him and dust touching his bruised cheek. For no reason at all in the world, they would have killed me. He walked toward the far curb, telling each foot to go and keep going, and somehow he had picked up the spilled books. He didn't even remember bending or touching them. He kept moving them from hand to hand as if they were a poker hand he could not figure. I wonder if they were the ones who killed Clarice. He stopped and his mind said it again very loud. I wonder if they were the ones who killed Clarice. He wanted to run after them yelling. His eyes watered. The thing that had saved him was falling flat. The driver of the car, seeing Montag down, instinctively considered the probability that running over a body at such a high speed might turn the car upside down and spill them out. If Montag had remained an upright target, Montag gasped. So, as it's described as a Beetle, which, there is actually a Volkswagen Beetle as a car, but the cars in this society are kind of described as a Beetle. This thing is just picking up speed. And, this has been described by Mildred, who, when she gets frustrated sometimes, she just would like to go out to the countryside, just drive around and look to see, like, stray dogs and stuff and just hit them. Again, this is the way that the society deals with things that make them upset. They just go get in the car and destroy something. Which isn't much different than throwing something and destroying it in an incinerator, right? It's not much different. But this is something that makes it kind of strange to him as he realizes that these are just a bunch of kids. These are kids who don't care much about anything, right? Imagine Miss Bowles' kids, the way she describes her kids who'd rather kick her than kiss her. The people in this society are cruel, and Montag could have been hit just by chance by somebody who just wanted to hit somebody walking across the street, almost like he was a stray dog. It's crazy. Far down the boulevard, 4 blocks away, the Beetle had slowed, spun about on 2 wheels, and was now racing back, slanting over on the wrong side of the street, picking up speed. But Montag was gone, hidden in the safety of the dark alley for which he had set out on a long journey, an hour, or was it a minute ago? He stood shivering in the night, looking back out as the Beetle ran by and skidded back to the center of the avenue, whirling laughter in the air all about it, and gone. Farther on, as Montag moved in darkness, he could see the helicopters falling like the first flakes of snow in a long winter to come. The house was silent. Montag approached from the rear, creeping through a thick, night-moistened scent of daffodils and roses and wet grass. He touched the screen door in back and found it open. He slipped in, moved across the porch listening. Mrs. Black, you asleep in there? He thought. This isn't good, but your husband did it to others and never asked and never wondered and never worried. And now, since you're a fireman's wife, it's your house and your turn. For all the houses your husband burnt, the people he hurt without thinking. The house did not reply. He hid the books in the kitchen and moved from the house again to the alley and looked back at the house that was still dark and quiet, sleeping. On his way across town, with the helicopters fluttering like torn bits of paper in the sky, he phoned the alarm at a lonely phone booth outside a store that was closed for the night. Then he stood in the cold night air, waiting, and at a distance he heard the fire sirens start up and run, and the salamanders coming to burn Mr. Black's house while he was away at work, to make his wife stand shivering in the morning air while the roof let go and dropped in upon the fire. But now she was still asleep. Good night, Mrs. Black, he thought. It's a pretty insidious thing he's doing here. But again, this was the plan that him and Faber decided on, is that why not start planting books in firemen's houses, having the firemen kind of destroy themselves, right? The salamander devours its tail. Takes a lot of work, but it's a start. Faber. Another rap, a whisper, and a long waiting. Then, after a minute, a small light flickered inside Faber's small house. After another pause, the back door opened. They stood looking at each other in the half-light, Faber and Montag, as if each did not believe in the other's existence. Then Faber moved and put out his hand and grabbed Montag and moved him in and sat him down and went back and stood in the door, listening. The sirens were wailing off in the morning distance. He came in and shut the door. Montag said, "I've been a fool all down the line. I can't stay long. I'm on my way to God knows where." "At least you were a fool about the right things," said Faber. "I thought you were dead. The audio capsule I gave you burnt. I heard the captain talking to you, and suddenly there was nothing. I almost came out looking for you." "The captain's dead. He found the audio capsule. He heard your voice. He was going to trace it. I killed him with a flamethrower." Faber sat down and did not speak for a time. "My God, how did this happen?" said Montag. "It was only the other night. Everything was fine, and the next thing I know, I'm drowning. How many times can a man go down and still be alive? I can't breathe. There's Beatty dead. He was my friend once. And there's Millie gone. I thought she was my wife, but now I don't know. And the house all burnt. My job gone, and myself on the run. I planted a book in a fireman's house on the way. Good Christ, the things I've done in a single week." "You did what you had to do. It was coming on for a long time." "Yes, I believe it. If there's nothing else, I believe. It saved itself to happen. I could feel it for a long time. I was saving something up. I went around doing one thing and feeling another. God, it was all there. It's a wonder it didn't show on me like fat. And now here I am, messing up your life too. They might follow me here." "I feel alive for the first time in years," said Faber. "I feel I'm doing what I should have done a lifetime ago. For a little while, I'm not afraid. Maybe it's because I'm doing the right thing at last. Maybe it's because I've done a rash thing and I don't want to look the coward to you. I suppose I'll have to do even more violent things, exposing myself so I won't fall down on the job and turn scared again." "What are your plans?" "To keep running. You know the war's on?" "I heard." "God, isn't it funny?" said the old man. "It seems so remote because we have our own troubles. I haven't had the time to think." Montag drew out $100. "I want this to stay with you. Use it any way that'll help when I'm gone. But I might be dead by noon. Use this." Faber nodded. "You better head to the river if you can. Follow along it. If you can hit the old railroad lines, go out into the country and follow them. Even though practically everything's airborne these days, and most of the tracks are abandoned, the rails are still there rusting. I've heard there are still hobo camps all across the country, here and there, and walking camps they call them. And if you keep walking far enough, keep your eyes peeled, they say there's lots of old Harvard degrees on the tracks between here and Los Angeles. Most of them are wanted and hunted in the cities. But they survive, I guess. There aren't many of them, and I guess the government's never considered a great enough danger to go in and track them down. You might hole up with them for a time and get in touch with me in St. Louis. I'm leaving for the 5 a.m. bus this morning. See a retired printer there. I'm getting out in the open myself at last. This money will be put to good use. Thanks. God bless you. Do you want to sleep a few minutes?" "I better run." "Let's check." So, real quick, something I want to mention here. The plan is for him to run and take the railroad lines that are now abandoned in this city. And what he says out there is there's a lot of old Harvard degrees on the tracks between here and Los Angeles, which is a really interesting way of describing like these really educated or maybe other professors like him, but people who are, fugitives in this society can go escape out there. The government doesn't really track them down. So, like, the railroad tracks are abandoned, but they're really still full of people. It's just like the unmentionable people, and people like Montag is set to become. So, better check to see if he has time to stick around and catch a nap. He took Montag quickly into the bedroom and lifted a picture frame aside, revealing a television screen the size of a postal card. I always wanted something very small, something I could walk to, something I could blot out with the palm of my hand if necessary. Sounds like a screen on a cell phone. But nothing that could shout me down, nothing monstrous big. So you see, he snapped it on. That's something that's kind of interesting from our society, is that just because a screen is small doesn't mean that it can't distract us. So in this society, Bradbury describes like having the smaller TV is better than a parlor wall, perhaps. But in our society, these little screens are just as, if not more, distracting than a TV. Montag, the TV set said and lit up. Montag. The name was spelled out by a voice. Guy Montag, still running. Police helicopters are up. A new mechanical hound has been brought from another district. Montag and Faber looked at each other. Mechanical hound never fails. Never since its first use in tracking quarry has this incredible invention made a mistake. Tonight, this network is proud to have the opportunity to follow the hound by camera, helicopter, as it starts on its way to the target. Faber poured 2 glasses of whiskey. We'll need these. They drank. No, so sensitive, the mechanical hound can remember and identify 10,000 odor indexes on 10,000 men without resetting. Faber trembled the least bit and looked about at his house, at the walls, the door, the doorknob, the chair where Montag now sat. Montag saw the look. They both looked quickly about the house, and Montag felt his nostrils dilate, and he knew that he was trying to track himself, and his nose was suddenly good enough to sense the path that he had made in the air of the room, and the sweat of his hand hung from the doorknob, invisible but as numerous as the jewels of a small chandelier. He was a luminous cloud, a ghost that made breathing once more impossible. He saw Faber stop up his own breath for fear of drawing that ghost into his own body, perhaps being contaminated with the phantom exhalations and odors of a running man. The mechanical hound is now landing by helicopter at the site of the burning. And there, on the small screen, was the burnt house, and the crowd, and something with a sheet over it. And out of the sky, fluttering, came the helicopter like a grotesque flower. So they must have their game out, thought Montag. The circus must go on, even with the war beginning within the hour. He watched the scene, fascinated, not wanting to move. It seemed so remote, and no part of him. It was a play apart and separate, wondrous to watch, not without its strange pleasure. Well, that's all for me, he thought. That's all taking place just for me, by God. If he wished, he could linger here in comfort and follow the entire hunt on through its swift phases, down alleys, across streets, over empty running avenues, crossing lots and playgrounds with pauses here or there for the necessary commercials, up other alleys to the burning house of Mr. and Mrs. Black, and so on, finally to this house with Faber and himself seated, drinking, while the electric hound snuffed down the last trail, silent as a drift of death itself, skidding to a halt outside the window there. Then, if he wished, Montag might rise and walk up to the window, keep one eye on the TV screen, open the window, lean out, look back, see himself dramatized and described and made over standing there, limned in the bright, small television screen from outside, a drama to be watched objectively, knowing that in other parlors he was large as life, in full color, dimensionally perfect, and if he kept his eye peeled quickly, he would see himself, an instant before oblivion, being punctured for the benefit of how many civilian parlor sitters who had been wakened from sleep a few minutes ago by the frantic sirening of their living room walls to come watch the big game, the hunt, The one-man carnival. Would he have time for a speech? As the hound seized him in the view of 10 or 20 or 30 million people, might he sum up his entire life in the last week in one single phrase, or a word that would stay with them long enough after the hound had turned, clenching him in its metal plier jaws, and trotted off in the darkness, while the camera remained stationary, watching the creature dwindle in the distance? A splendid fade-out. What could he say in a single word, a few words, that would sear all their faces and wake them up? "There," whispered Faber. Out of a helicopter glided something that was not a machine, not an animal, not dead, not alive, glowing with a pale green luminosity. It stood near the smoking ruins of Montag's house, and the men brought his discarded flamethrower to it and put it down under the muzzle of the hound. There was a whirring, a clicking, and a humming. Montag shook his head and got up and drank the rest of his drink. "It's time. I'm sorry about this." "About what? Me? My house? I deserve everything. Run, for God's sakes. Perhaps I can delay them here." "Wait. There's no use you being discovered. When I leave, burn the spread of this bed that I touched. Burn the chair in the living room, in your room, and the wall incinerator. And just wipe down the furniture with alcohol. Wipe the doorknobs. Burn the throw rug in the parlor. Turn the air conditioning on full in all the rooms and spray it with moth spray if you have it. Then turn on your lawn sprinklers as high as they'll go and hose off the sidewalks. With any luck at all, we can kill the trail in here anyway." Faber shook his hand. "I'll tend to it. Good luck. If we're both in good health next week, the week after, get in touch. General delivery, St. Louis. I'm sorry there's no way I can go with you this time by earphone. That was good for both of us, but my equipment was limited. You see, I never thought I would use it. What a silly old man. I never thought there. Stupid. It was stupid. So, I have another green bullet, the right kind, to put in your head. So go now." "One last thing. Quick, a suitcase. Get it and fill it with your dirtiest clothes. An old suit, the dirtier the better. A shirt, some old sneakers, socks." Faber was gone, and back in a minute. They sealed the cardboard valise with clear tape. "To keep the ancient odor of Mr. Faber in, of course," said Faber, sweating at the job. Montag doused the exterior of the valise with whiskey. "I don't want the hound picking up two odors at once. May I take this whiskey? I'll need it later. Christ, I hope this works." They shook hands again, and going out the door, glanced at the TV. The hound was on its way, followed by hovering helicopter cameras, silently sniffing the great wind. It was running down the first alley. "Goodbye." And Montag was out the back door slightly, running with the half-empty valise. Behind him, he heard the lawn sprinkling system jump up, filling the dark air with rain that fell gently, and then with a steady pour all about, washing on the sidewalks and draining into the alley. He carried a few drops of this rain with him on his face. He thought he heard the old man call goodbye, but he wasn't certain. He ran very fast, away from the house, down toward the river. And that's a good stopping point for today. All right, so Montag stops at Faber's house, wants to check in with him, and just essentially say goodbye, give him the money that he had. Remember, for the printer, he was going to have the printer make copies of the book. So they have a plan to possibly meet up if they're okay, but it's not looking good for Montag. The hound is on the loose and chasing him. And as the man on the TV said, the hound never misses its target. So that is concerning. Next week, we will see how this thing wraps up as Montag is on the run for his life. Okay? You guys answer your questions today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You take care, all right? Have a good day.